Zadar Airport, and I'm ready to go. Yeah, I'm ready. Parking brake off. Used to be a military airfield, I think. Croatian Air Force still use it. I suppose a lot of airports used to be military airports. Where I started from at Hapley Green, that was Birmingham Airport. It's the other way around. Started as a civilian airfield in 1939, but quickly got requisitioned to be used by the RAF. So let's get up and away like a not very magnificent man in his magnificent flying machine. I used to fly the kids when they were very little, support them in the palm of my hand and fly them around the lounge while singing, "Those magnificent men in their flying machines, they go up, tiddly up, up, they go down, tiddly down, down." So, let's go up, tiddly up, up. Yeah, let's go. Let's get out of here. Hopefully no Croatian Air Force today to shoot me out of the sky. Up we go. There we go, Sylvia. Let's do our usual sharp left turn. And our usual head southeast, shall we? An evening flight along the beautiful Dalmatian coastline. Follow the coast. Can't go wrong. Surely you can't go wrong. Let's lower those revs a bit. Decrease the RPM a bit. And we are away. I'm still heading for Athens with these rings that Paula persuaded me to return to her ex. I wish I'd said no, really. I mean, they're making me nervous. The trouble with landing at Zadar was that there was more involved passport and customs checks than I'd had in other places. I didn't know what to do with them. Rings. I couldn't leave them in the plane in case they got stolen. I didn't know whether to declare them or not. I mean, what would I be declaring? Good afternoon, officer. I'm declaring this wedding ring and this engagement ring. They're not mine. Not yours? Then why do you have them? Well, I haven't stolen them, honest. A friend asked me to fly them to Athens for her to give back to her ex-husband. Why? Well, it's a long story. I think they've split up. She doesn't want them. They remind her of him and their life together, I suppose. Good times and bad times. She doesn't know what to do with them. Can't throw them away. She saw that I was flying around the world, so gave them to me. Safer than posting. Sir, I think you'd better come with me. So I didn't want to risk that. I decided not to declare them. I mean, I can't imagine they're that valuable that I would be arrested for avoiding duty. And I'm not importing them. They're in transit. I was getting flashbacks of filling in carnets, making sure every tool, every bit of kit was accounted for, and then getting nervous at borders as armed guards asked for the van to be opened up. Getting worried that I might get into trouble for having presents of wine or Lego not documented on the carnet. Most times they just had a cursory glance in the back of the van, stamped the paperwork and waved you through. We did have a couple of times when we got asked to get everything out. Once in Romania, once in Latvia. Massive pain in the arse. All that misery has come back tenfold since Brexit. Anyway, I went for a green channel. Border guards dressed in blue, pistols on their belts. One of them even had an assault rifle slung across his chest. He was whispering something into a radio, trying to work out whether he was whispering about me. Rings suddenly felt like they weighed a ton in my little flight bag. I felt like everyone knew I was carrying them, could almost hear people whispering, "My precious." Ridiculous. I wasn't crossing Mordor, just Zadar Airport. Don't look at them. Don't look guilty. Of course, people who tell themselves not to look guilty always end up looking guilty. If they stopped me, I'd tell the truth, every word of it. Except the truth, of course, sounds exactly like a lie. I took deep breaths. As it was, they couldn't have cared less about me. So I still have the rings, and I'm still on my mission to get them to Athens. It's been a tough stay. I arrived in Zadar wanting some rest and recuperation. I've found flying tiring, but I couldn't get any sleep. I just lay there, and when just lying there didn't work, I got up and had a little walk around, splashed my face with cool water to refresh myself before trying again. I couldn't find a comfortable position. I even tried sitting in a chair. These days I can doze off in a chair reading a book, no problem. So I thought that might work. If I'd had a book, I would have read it in order to try to doze off. But I didn't bring any books with me. I had to pack light. I checked the bedside table to see if there was a Gideon Bible there. I reckon I could pick out the creation story even in Serbo-Croat, but there was nothing in there but a bit of fluff, a pencil, and a Kirby grip. I kept them both. Might come in handy, I thought, and save the cleaner a job. I lay there in my little room trying to think of nothing, which is quite hard to do, and it only made me more present in my own body, thinking about its wiring and plumbing, freaking out about the well-being of the systems all designed to keep me alive, operating beneath the level of consciousness they're designed not to be thought about. Is my blood pressure okay? Are my valves functioning? Are there any clots? Have I got a predetermined number of heartbeats allocated that are now counting down? How many have I got left? If I died in this hotel room, would a chambermaid find me, or would it be the duty manager? Would they immediately know that I was dead, or initially duck out of the room, apologising for disturbing what they weren't to know was the undisturbable? Would the embassy repatriate my body? I don't think I've got any life insurance anymore, now that the mortgage is paid off. I keep meaning to take out one of those over 50 plans, but I don't think they repatriate pilots. And then I started thinking about Izzy. If I was found dead, what would Izzy think? Would, within her shock and distress, would she be just a tiny bit relieved? I worry that maybe she would, deep down. Why am I here, not there? Yeah, thinking of nothing wasn't helping me get to sleep at all. And it was too hot. The room was stuffy, but the open window brought in too much noise. There was a nightclub somewhere nearby. Later, eventually, I gave up. I got up and I went out. I was quite near the seafront down one of the main streets, so I wandered in the pleasant pre-dawn suspension to see what was going on. Nothing much. No one else seemed to have much of a problem sleeping. I sat on the waterfront and listened to the beautiful sea organ, hoping it might lull me somehow. Though falling asleep on the promenade might not have been a good idea. It did relax me, though. It's an amazing thing. There are pipes and chambers built into the steps of the promenade, and the waves of the Adriatic push air in and out of the pipes, making musical tones and harmonies. A bit like a low-pitched clangers. It changes as you walk up and down the prom, and of course it'll never sound the same twice. Then I wandered down to the harbour. The ferries had stopped for the night. Probably about to start again for the next day. There were lights on in the cruise ships, cleaners cleaning, or maybe waiting staff setting tables for breakfast. I don't fancy going on a cruise, but I wouldn't mind working on one. Izzy's too restless for a cruise, and, well, I hate any hint of forced communal fun, but being crew, that could be different though. I think I'd like the camaraderie, the all-in-it-together spirit, us versus them. Although us versus them probably isn't an attitude the cruise ship company encourages in its workforce. Not being able to sleep is... it's rare for me. I'm normally out like a light and then up with the lark. Drives Izzy mad, she struggles to sleep. Then she worries that she's keeping me awake. So she tries not to move, which makes her more tense and then even less able to get to sleep. I was a bit shocked when I first found people found it difficult to drop off. Of course, being anxious about not being able to sleep doesn't help. It becomes a vicious circle. I'm only really like that when I have a plane to catch that isn't my own. Though of course I do get nervous before each of these flights. I didn't expect to sleep perfectly last night, and I didn't. There are about 1,200 islands dotted along the Dalmatian coast. Only about 50 have people living on them. The islands are actually the tops of mountain ridges. After the last global ice age, the sea levels rose and they flooded the valleys between the mountain tops. Only the crests of the ridges of the valleys left. And that's what these islands are. Did a pretty good job for the tourist industry, that last ice age. Flying is tiring. It's like driving. Secretly tiring. You don't think you're doing anything, but you have to concentrate. There's no autopilot on Sylvia, so I have to keep her in a straight line. She does like to drift off. Not to sleep, of course. At least, I hope not. Not yet. So far, we've been going well. Even being a passenger on an aircraft is tiring. Must be something to do with the droning noise of the engine. Being uncomfortable for hours on end doesn't help either. Not being able to move around very much, the blood pooling in your feet and calves. I now use long-haul flights to catch up on films I've missed. Though Oppenheimer on a tiny seat-back screen probably wasn't how the makers intended it to be watched. I can't remember what we used to do on long flights before those entertainment systems. I suppose you all had to watch the same film, which had to be child-friendly. Maybe in those days I just drank lots and nodded off. I'm not really a fan of sitting down, though I never went as far as having one of those standing desks and seats that will fold you up in half. I did do an O-level in technical drawing as my art subject at school, and I loved the sloped drawing table and the stool, the parallel rule that would slide smoothly up and down, and your set square you could slide along that to get verticals, and then a 30-degree set square which would allow you to do the perspectives. I was a bit messy, but I was good at it. The teacher was terrifying. He wanted perfection, which was tough to get from a bunch of 15-year-olds. But looking back now, I admire his ambition for us. I would smudge my 2H pencil lines, but crucially, I was always accurate. I think I've got a gift for conceptualizing shapes and spaces. That's another thing I thought everyone could do, until I learnt that they can't. It really helps when you're packing the car before setting off on holiday, or trying to cram everything into the back of a van for a work trip, particularly after customs officials have just asked you to unload it. The teacher was keen I should advance to do the A level. I don't think he recruited many people for that, so he was pretty forceful with me. It was tempting, but I couldn't work out where it would lead. He didn't sell me the possibilities. I could only envision it leading to becoming a draftsman. I think Tom Good was a draftsman in The Good Life, till he gave it all up for self-sufficiency. That might have persuaded me to do it. Looking back now, though, combined with other things, it could have led to me becoming a designer or an architect. When you look back on your life, you can always see various points like that where decisions have helped determine your future. They call them sliding doors now, though I think of them more as points on a train track. Maybe I'm more determinist. I sometimes imagine being an architect. Think it would have been good. That combination of a bit of flair with a whole load of technical practicality. It's a responsibility, of course. You leave a concrete legacy. Well, if concrete is your chosen material, you're creating spaces for other people to exist in. On a small scale, if it's an extension or loft conversion. On a large scale, if it's an office block or airport terminal. Creating spaces for people to live their lives in or around. I read a nice quote recently from architect Mariam Kamara. She said, "Architecture is the stage on which we live our lives." Maybe the architect's job then is to inject a bit of drama into life. Of course, those big projects they're like blockbuster movies. Chief architect gets all the glory, but there's a host of talented people that they're working with to make sure everything happens. A party once, I chatted for a long time with a young woman, newly qualified architect. She'd spent a year designing a fire escape. She was working on an essential element of the building that you hope will never be used. There was no glory in it, but she was able to find satisfaction in devising elegant solutions to all the problems that she'd encountered. I love the term elegant solution. There's not enough elegance in the world. Brutalism has an allure, I suppose, but I'd vote for elegance every time, if the brutes would let me. If I'd chosen the technical drawing route, it wouldn't have been long before I was having to switch to working on computers. That time in the early 80s, my school had just got its first computer, a BBC Micro. Lived in its own room, the computer room. People would stand at the door and look at it and retreat. It was unclear how many of the teachers actually knew how to turn it on. The Micro stood for microcomputer. It's difficult to think of anything more micro than the 32 kilobyte model, except of course the 16 kilobyte model, which was significantly cheaper. Not sure which version the school had. I didn't go into it that deeply, but I did like working on the logic of basic programming language. A couple of years later in school they got a couple more microcomputers, a Commodore 64 I think, and so they decided they could run O-level computer science. Quite a few of us took it. Teacher had to teach from the textbook as she went along. She didn't know much more than we did. It's quite nice really. A bit like Reggio Emilia that we flew over. We were all learning together. Once a term we had to get a coach to Wolverhampton Poly to use their computers. The storage took up a whole floor. The computers we used didn't have screens, they just had paper. So you typed in your basic commands, typed run, and it did whatever you'd programmed. Probably the answer to 2 plus 2. We got chased out of the Manda shopping centre by local kids one visit. They spotted we weren't very streetwise country kids. I ended up being bought a second-hand Commodore VIC-20. My cousin had a new ZX Spectrum. Actually, I wasn't jealous. VIC-20 had bigger keys, looked less like a toy. For my coursework, I wrote a stock control program for my mum's second-hand bookshop. It was useless, of course. Maybe I would have been one of those people who were flexible enough to keep their drafting job through all the cuts and efficiency savings. I would have been one of the first to get to grips with CAD, 3D modelling and so on. I'd been better at this than real-world modelling. Architectural models are amongst my favourite things, like model train sets, but unfortunately, like my smudged pencil lines, my models would have been blighted by glue prints and bent bits of card or dripping paint, signs of the giant whose hands built the model that the blank scaled figures stand in. In Hanover, our route to work passed an architectural model workshop each morning. I would press my hands against the window like a kid, imagining maybe I'd get a job in there once. I might have been able to make the model that they had in the rat house of what Hanover looked like at the end of the Second World War. I could now have a career building virtual spaces, creating buildings and landscapes for online games or CGI for movies. Although my dislike of fantasy might have caught me out at interview. One day, walking home from Brum, I passed the remains of a spectacular car crash. Big black car on its side, its bonnet drastically crumpled and roof fully messed up. Then I started to notice the telltale signs, a red foam box, lithe young figures in futuristic skin-tight clothing, officious types with headsets and clipboards. They were filming Ready Player One. There is Split coming up. To recklessly split the infinitive is to boldly go beyond where 19th century grammar has gone before. People who idealise Latin hate having the infinitive split. In Latin, because the infinitive is a single word, you can't thrust an adverb into the middle of it. In English, however, the gap after the to is way too tempting to not put something in there. Who can resist split? I could have got here much more quickly and probably more cheaply from Birmingham on a budget airline. In need of a holiday, then let's split to split. Split to split, spectacular holidays on the Croatian coast. Like many old cities on the coast round here, Split has been fought over regularly since its foundation by the ancient Greeks. Oh, at that time they weren't ancient, they were just Greek. It seems everyone's had a bit of a go at occupying Split at some point. The Romans, the Ostrogoths, Byzantians, Venetians, even the Croatians, Dalmatians occasionally. Of course, the Hungarians and Austrians had a go, and it was part of the Kingdom of Bosnia at one point, 700 years ago. The Nepalese took their turn. That's people from Naples, not people from Nepal. It was part of the Holy Roman Empire. Napoleon was in charge for a while, as were the Nazis and Italians, before it became the Socialist Republic of Croatia within the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. I used to like reading up on the history of the places I was visiting. Although saying that, I read a 300-page history of Sicily once in preparation for going on holiday there. I'd hoped to be primed and inspired to explore the island, but by the time I'd ploughed through its history of war, civil war, invasion, exploitation and resistance, I was pretty depressed. If history teaches us one thing, it's that collections of human beings can't help fighting one another. I've not had a fight since primary school, I don't think. Even that wasn't really a fight, it was more a disagreement accompanied by a shove. It didn't end up with everyone gathered around in a circle shouting, "Fight! Fight! Fight! Fight!" until Mr. Lee, one of the fourth year teachers, would sprint out of the staff room to break it up. No other teachers seemed to want to do the breaking up, even if they were on playground duty. Maybe they knew Mr. Lee was the one who actually liked doing it, so they let him get on with it. I see him occasionally in town when I visit my parents. We have a friendly chat about what everyone is doing. Weirdly, he still looks the same, though he must be in his 80s. Although when you're in primary school, you think that teachers are pretty much in their 80s anyway. On the last flight, I thought that the slip of Slovenian coastline between Italy and Croatia was a legacy of Yugoslavia breaking up, but chatting to a guy in Zadar the other night, he put me right. The borders already existed as republics within a federation. He also talked about how under Tito, Yugoslavia was communist, but because the Yugoslav partisans had largely liberated themselves without any help from the Red Army, they were empowered to maintain greater independence from the other Soviets and avoided being a vassal state. Despite huge pressure from Stalin, Tito clung to power, used Stalin's playbook against him, carrying out internal purges to rid the country of pro-Soviet figures. Through the Cold War, Tito was at the heart of a non-aligned movement of states, attempting not to side with either East or West, so he forged alliances with India, Indonesia, Egypt. Unusually for a communist leader, he also allowed his citizens to travel abroad, confident that they'd want to return. When he died, World leaders from across the global divide attended the funeral. When Yugoslavia broke up in the early 90s, I went in to help with power distribution. Over a meal in a private restaurant high in the hills above Belgrade, a Serbian politician explained to me how Tito had held the federation together with a shared vision of a united Yugoslavia, how under his guidance a civil war would not have been conceivable. Seemed a bit idealistic to me, probably over nostalgic, but what did I do? What did I know? I was only there to keep the lights on. What I don't doubt is that this politician had benefited from the training opportunities made available to him in communist Yugoslavia. He seemed to have done loads of things, including training as a pilot, before eventually finding himself in politics. I met him many years later in Novi Sad, disgusted by politics. He was working on his memoirs. We went to his friend's vineyard for wine tasting, drank way too much rosé wine. He invited me to his place in Dubrovnik, but when I was there, he wasn't. I think of him often. Skeptic, raconteur, storyteller. A man who's maybe seen too much. We're flying through a channel between the mainland and the island of Brac down there. I think that's how you say it. They make olive oil, and its limestone has been used to make villas, palaces and monuments all across the world. Parliaments of Vienna and Budapest, the Governor's Palace in Trieste, even the lobby of the United Nations building in New York. Still a masonry school down there on the island. All this water, though, has to be delivered by a pipeline from the mainland. Kirby grip was another great Birmingham innovation from the mid-19th century. spread to far-flung corners of the world. Its name comes from the original manufacturer, Kirby Beard and Co. Sarah wore her hair in a bob for years. Well, right up until she gained an opinion about how she looked and realised she had a choice about how she looked. She realised she was the only one in her class, perhaps in the whole school, with a bob, and she made the choice that she would prefer to conform. So she demanded that we let her hair grow long like so many of her friends. It was a shame. She had a beautiful bob. Izzy and I loved it. For the first few months of her life, she hardly had any hair at all. It was thin, white and wispy. Then it came in really thick and her bob was sharp, neat. It was years before she was making the best of her hair again. She started to sculpt it in the mirror with a dryer and curling tongs, putting off a look that would have convinced even me to buy conditioner if she'd been in an advert. She never went back to the bob, despite my lobbying or bobbying. Not sure a father could ever persuade a daughter to change her hairstyle. Probably shouldn't either. In America, they call the Kirby grip a bobby pin. It's not a pin as such, but helps to pin the hair back in a bob, so bobby pin. I'm sure there's a film in which Kirby grip becomes a hero, comes to the rescue in some way. Maybe it's just used to pick a lock. Apparently you can do that. 2 grips, one to be a lever and one to be a pick. Not sure if that's feasible. I've never tried. Don't think it would work on ours. We've got anti-snap locks on our doors now after a spate of burglaries on our road. Not sure what the difference is. There's a big apartment block on the old Kirby Beard and Co site on Bradford Street. One of those ones with shared amenities for urban professionals. They call it Hairpin House. If it was on a corner, it'd be on Hairpin Bend, I suppose. I used to find grips in the pockets of all my trousers. Sarah needed a single clip to keep her hair out of her eyes. She had a whole range of them, all different colours and sizes, spotted and sparkling, striped and plain. So I was never without a spare or two. At business meetings I'd look down at my fingers to find myself snapping one of the grips open and shut, an improvised fidget toy, subconsciously helping me through a difficult problem. Now, consciously reminding of her in nursery and primary school and the clock ticking down to when I'd have to rush off to gather her home. A walk through the park talking about her day, but more importantly, talking about the dogs we met en route each day. My friends said, call out if you think there's going to be anyone who is going to answer you. Which of the saints are you going to turn to? They said, wrath kills the foolish, envy and resentment end in destruction. They've seen the foolish have their homes destroyed around them, their children lost, crushed in court and no one there to save them. They've seen the rich have all their possessions taken away, everything they have earned stolen from under their noses and dispersed, squandered, consumed by others. They said, affliction doesn't come forth from dust, neither does trouble spring out of the ground. Yet man is born into trouble as the sparks fly upwards. Pauli said he'd ask God for help, he'd put it all before God, God who does great things and unsearchable, marvellous things without number, who gives rain upon the earth and sends water upon the fields, who sets up on high those that have been low, causes those who mourn to be lifted by victory. He disappoints the devices of the crafty so that their hands cannot perform their enterprises, who traps the cunning in their own craftiness and throws the plans of schemers headlong into confusion. So then they meet with darkness in the daytime, they grope in the noonday as in the night. God who saves the weak from the grip of the strong, so they can hope again. Bella said, happy is the man whom God corrects. Don't reject this punishment from the Almighty, for what is made sore is bound up, and the hands that wound will make whole. She said, if God delivers you 6 troubles, you will be saved. 7, and no evil will ever touch you. In famine you will be redeemed from death, in war from the power of the sword. Slander will not touch you. When destruction comes, you need not be afraid. You will laugh in the face of destruction and famine. Neither will you be afraid of the beasts of the earth, for you will be in league with the stones of the field. And the beasts of the field will be at peace with you, and you will know that your household is safe, and wherever you sleep, it will be in peace. And you will know that your children will be safe and happy, and they will have many children who will also prosper, and your descendants will be as many as the blades of grass across the earth. And you will die at the right and proper time in your old age. Friends said they've looked all this up. They've asked around, and it is all true. Another of those very short national coastlines is coming up. The Bosnia and Herzegovina's only got 12 miles of coastline. There's a narrow strip of land called the Neum Corridor that splits Croatia in two. The double border crossing was a pain for people trying to drive between the two parts of Croatia, so they built this bridge that connects the northern part of Croatia to a long spit of land that protrudes from the southern section of Croatia. The Pelješac Bridge means drivers don't have to dip in and out of Bosnia and Herzegovina as they are making their way down the Croatian coast. Now, I think we are in Bosnia. Hard to tell from up here. Those borders don't mean very much. Yeah, you can see why a bridge might have been a good idea. Still in Bosnia. Still in Bosnia. That's Neum down there on the left. Bosnia and Herzegovina's only coastal town. In the Bay of Marlistorm, down there, they farm oysters and mussels. I could eat both of those things again, but it did take a year or so after the great 2008 Zurich food poisoning event. Still in Bosnia, I think. Still in Bosnia. They sort of do look the same, these Adriatic towns. In a good way, of course. Still in Bosnia, I think. They don't really put borders in the sky, nor in rivers. I remember looking across the Dalgava River over to Belarusia. The border's right down the middle, but you couldn't see it. Down there on the road, though, that's where you get your passport stamped, your van and your car checked, and we're back in Croatia again. Still, that was a nice visit to Bosnia. Maybe we'll be back another time. Sometimes breaking your journey is essential. I could fall asleep flying. It would be easy but awkward. Sleeping is dangerous when you're flying a plane, especially one like Silvio with no autopilot, no co-pilot, not even a rumble strip. I think an alarm may go off if our altitude drops too much or the rate of descent becomes too high. My instructor didn't really tell me all about that. I don't want to test it out. Best to stay awake. It's at times like this, when you're very tired, that it's brought home to you how unnatural flying or driving is for us humans. When else could you be so close to critical danger and remain so dozy? One part of your brain is saying, just close your eyes for a moment, all will be well. While another, less powerful part of your brain is screaming, don't do that! Don't! You will die! The screaming cortex is unable to communicate with the soporific cortex. Just a moment of snoozing is all you need. Don't be stupid, you'll die! But I'm so tired, I just need to close my eyes. You will die! Though so close, the concept of death is entirely conceptual. While you're awake, it's as if you're outside of yourself, already asleep, dreaming. The roar of the rumble strip connects directly to the primal you. Rational argument is short-circuited by a reflex adrenal injection. Your heart rate leaps, your arteries dilate, blood sugar spikes, your eyes dilate. Where is the tiger? I heard the roar of a lion. Fight or flight. Eyes on the road, eyes on the altitude. The Croatia Heroes Bridge. It's down there somewhere. Quite a few wind turbines on the peaks around here. People love to complain about wind turbines. They say they're ugly, they're noisy, they kill birds, they're a blot on the landscape. I've heard all of it. Funny thing is that most of the people saying it don't know that much about them. A modern turbine it's an extraordinary bit of engineering. They're often 100 metres tall, blades 60 plus metres. Offshore ones, blades are even longer, as long as a Boeing 747 wingspan. They turn at only 10 or 15 revolutions a minute, but because the blades are so long, the tips are actually travelling at motorway speeds, but from a distance they look slow and graceful. They're a bit like me and Sylvia, constantly adjusting themselves to the wind, changing the angle of the blades, turning to face the breeze, all controlled by computers. People imagine they take over the countryside, but the actual footprint is pretty small. Farmers can carry on growing crops, grazing sheep, almost right up to the base. Yes, birds do sometimes collide with them, but far more birds are killed by buildings, traffic, and your domestic cat. And they don't keep spinning in a gale. When the wind gets too strong, they feather the blades, shut themselves down to protect the machinery. They're not perfect, nothing is, but if you understand how they work, it's hard not to admire them. Elegant machines, quietly turning one of the oldest forces on the earth into electricity. Charles Lindbergh famously battled tiredness during his solo transatlantic flight in 1927. 18 hours into his flight on the way to Paris, he started to hallucinate. kept falling asleep, those little micro sleeps, moments when your head nods and you don't know if you've been asleep for seconds or hours. He flew non-stop for 33.5 hours. I struggle with 2.5. Tiredness kills. Motorway service stations in England are mandated to be no more than 28 miles apart. Airports are a bit less predictable and more difficult to find. Less signposts. If you haven't slept for 24 hours, your reaction times and processing speed drop as if you've drunk enough to put you over the legal limit to drive. Let's hope that isn't about to happen now. I've packed some coffee, but I should have tried to source some dexamphetamine, dexes, as in midnight runners. They would help in the short term, but probably destroy me in the long term. Dubrovnik coming up. Just down there in the distance. See it just between those two land masses. That is the Franjo Tuđman Bridge, named after the first president of Croatia. Like many, he's a bit of a mixed figure in history. For many Croatians, he's the leader who helped steer the country to independence in the 90s and is seen as the father of modern Croatia. Others take a more critical view of his time in power, pointed to the way politics was run back then and Croatia's involvement in the wider conflicts during the breakup of Yugoslavia. So like a lot of leaders from that era around here, depends who you ask. Still, he got a beautiful bridge named after him. I'm excited to see Dubrovnik from the air. The walled old town is amazing. My memory is the whole place is paved in white marble. That might just be false memory. I remember paying to walk along the top of the walls. It was worth a few euros to look down on the higgledy-piggledy maze of terracotta roofs. That must be it. Here he comes. Blink, and we'll miss it. Centuries and centuries of history. Gone. In a flash. When I was working there, after work, one of the people I was working with invited me to play basketball with his mates. I never really played basketball, but I never turned down an opportunity to meet new people, so why not? turns out the court was at the topmost edge of Dubrovnik's old town, right up against the city wall, so much up against the city wall that the wall sliced a whole section off the court. So rather than being rectangular with the nets and backboards facing each other, this course was like a lowercase r, the backboard set at an obtuse angle from the other. Teams had to develop whole new strategies for playing the game. It didn't impact on me much. I play a level or two below strategy. One of my mate's friends had a prosthetic leg. He was much better than I was. Everyone enjoyed shouting at me in Croatian, even the ones who I suspected spoke English. I unwittingly committed many fouls and emerged battered from what I'd always believed was a non-contact sport. Anyway, they were all really sweet and grinned at me whilst I floundered. It was only afterwards that I remembered how massive basketball is in Croatia. Dubrovnik is one of the locations used in Game of Thrones, so I'm told. Never watched it. The only time I've regretted not having watched it was the last time we were in Dubrovnik on a family holiday. It's all tourists having their photographs taken in locations linked to the series. There was endless merchandise and Game of Thrones tours. I don't think that airport down there was one of the locations, and tired as I am, I'm not going to land there. I'm going to do a Limburg. I'm going to push on. Not 33 hours, but just a little bit closer to Athens. Otherwise, I'm never going to get there, and those rings are never going to get delivered. Note came through our door at home once. Location scouts were looking for real places for fictional characters to live in. Our lives were already too complicated without sharing our house with a fictional family, but the people opposite, they signed up. For a while, I think one of the doctors in Doctors lived there. Every now and then a load of black vans would turn up, and studiously bored people in expensive puffer jackets would wander around holding styrofoam cups for half a day. Occasionally they'd turn a light on, eat a bacon sandwich, or speak into a walkie-talkie and hold up some traffic for a while. Then abruptly they'd pack up, go home. Nice work, if you can get it. I'm not really into fantasy. I can't really be bothered with dragons and goblins and all that. I think magic is a bit of a cheat for novelists. I don't like cheating. I like a set of rules. I know where I am then. I like to play by the rules. I can stretch or subvert them, maybe even break the rules if they're unjust or not working, but I don't like there being no rules. Mario Kopic is less sure. He was born in Dubrovnik. For him, the world is the space of being as an event. This being supersedes any other socially constructed mode of existence. What can be more important in life than life itself? What can be more precious in life than life itself? What is it that overtakes life? What is it that leaves life behind? Do we in life have anything other than life, except death? Down there is the border between Croatia and Montenegro. We look out for the Bay of Kotor. That's the start of Montenegro. And down there on the coast, the town of Herceg Novi. Not quite sure that's how you say it. There are quite difficult combinations of letters and sounds in these languages around here. I think, though, it translates as Newcastle. Quite a few Newcastles at home. Newcastle on Tyne, of course. Newcastle under Lyme. There's a Newcastle and a Newcastle Emlyn in Wales. There's Newcastle on Clun in Shropshire. One of the quietest places under the sun. Montenegro translates literally as Black Mountain. Hadn't occurred to me before, but like many things, it's obvious once you know. The Black Mountain itself is Lovchen, which is that peak in the distance, I think, southeast of the Bay of Kotor. I remember reading on the Black Hill, Bruce Chatwin, set sort of on the Black Mountains in Wales. Twin brothers growing up in a quiet, isolated, rural world shaped by farming, weather and time passing. The outside world happens around them, including the First World War. I think that despite their differences, they stay together. Decades and decades living and working together. A brotherly bond. But might be misremembering. Chatwin might have appreciated my journey. He had a need to travel, to keep moving. Nomadic existence. He died before he was even 50. King Nicholas of Montenegro was an early adopter of World War I. He rushed in to back up Serbia after the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand by Gavrilo Princip in Sarajevo. He started shelling the Austro-Hungarian Navy base down here in the Bay of Kotor as soon as he could. The priest Nyeos is buried in a mausoleum at the top of Lovsen. He was a poet, author of the Mountain Wreath, an epic history play written in verse about a long war with Turkey. It's judged by many to be the height of Serbian literature. Can't really judge as I've only skimmed through a translation. The editor of my volume chose to insert a misogynistic joke into his version, suggesting there's an incompatibility between faithfulness and beauty. I don't believe this. I believe there is beauty in faithfulness. Izzy is, was, and always will be beautiful. And she's faithful to her core. I know it. I am too. Sure, we've both had temptation put in our way as a function of working apart and living apart, but to quote Billy Bragg, who may well be quoting somebody else, virtue that is not tested. It's not virtue at all. We're both virtuous, certainly in that direction, if not all others. Then again, if you think about it another way, it could be argued that the truly virtuous wouldn't recognise temptation at all. For the truly virtuous, there'd have to be opportunity and no temptation. I suspect St. Paul would argue this, which would pitch St. Paul against Billy Bragg. Now that would be a podcast worth downloading. Then again, Jesus was tempted. Devil offered him 3 things. A lot of territory that could be seen from a high place, throwing himself down to be caught by angels, and something else. Stones into bread. Now that is tempting. Gluttony is probably my major vice, particularly when bread is involved. I could probably survive on toast with a few bags of salt and vinegar crisps thrown in. Well, I say survive. I did actually look into this. Bread and crisps are both rich in carbohydrates, which would give you energy, and crisps contain plenty of fat as well, so you wouldn't necessarily feel hungry all the time. But they'd leave some enormous gaps in your diet. You'd be getting far too little high quality protein, so over time your muscles would weaken and waste away. You'd be missing important vitamins like A, C and D, along with iron, vitamin B12 and healthy fats such as omega-3s. You'd start to feel tired. You'd be constipated and you'd constantly be feeling thirsty because of all the salt. You'd struggle to concentrate. You'd catch more colds. You'd find cuts and bruises taking longer to heal. Your hair would probably become thinner and lose its shine. Your nails become brittle and break more easily because your body would start diverting what few nutrients it had to keeping your vital organs going rather than maintaining your hair and nails. Keep going for long enough and you'd end up with a serious disease like scurvy, and then you'd probably die. Variety of diet is the spice of life. You can make beer from leftover bread. It's become a bit of a thing. Artisan bakers pass on their leftovers to artisan brewers. Beer's another thing I'm probably a bit too much of a glutton for. People queue round the block these days for a loaf of sourdough. I mean, I love bread, as I've said, but I prefer eating it than queuing up for it on a Saturday morning. Down there is Budvar, with its medieval walled old town, protecting it from invasion from mountain and from sea. Apparently, it's a bit of a party town. They don't make Budvar beer there though. That's got an R at the end and is Czech. Beer and a fag. That's the thing. Oh, not so much these days. Although maybe more so in Eastern Europe, where I think you can maybe still walk into a smoky bar. Pencil leads don't contain lead. Never have. They're a mixture of graphite and clay. The more clay there is, the harder the lead and the lighter the mark it makes. 2B for artistic drawing, not 2B for other kinds of drawing. 4H for technical drawing, for example. There's a rush to new technologies, but no one has exhausted what you can do with a pencil yet. Reminds me of the story about NASA. They spent millions of dollars designing a pen that would work in space, while the Soviets issued their astronauts with pencils. Apparently, though, that's a myth. The American astronauts started off using propelling pencils, but they didn't like the fact that the leads would break off and float around the capsule in zero gravity. A pen manufacturer saw a gap in this super niche market and reportedly spent $1 million solving the problem of writing in space. The pen they developed allows you to jot down your observations in zero gravity or upside down in full gravity, or underwater. We're not going to try that out. The trick is to invent a specialised ink which you can then pressurise in the pen, so you don't have to rely on gravity to get the ink out. The investment paid off for the manufacturer. For a start, they sold these pens to both sides of the space race, NASA and the Soviets, much as Brummies sold golden guns to both sides in the Spanish Civil War, I suppose. However, as less than 800 people have been into space, even if they had all taken their own space pen, the break-even cost would be well over $1,200 a unit, spread over 50 years. The real payback came with civilian sales. The marketing value of your pen being used in space, well, it's enormous. I saw one in a shop back in Zurich. It was branded with the logo of the Artemis mission. You could get one for 25 Swiss francs, refills for $6.50 and a pack of 3. There's a Seinfeld episode where Jerry visits his parents in Florida. Their neighbour, Jack Klompus, he's got an astronaut pen and he offers it to Jerry, who politely refuses. Then in typical Seinfeld fashion, it all ends up in feuds and tensions and accusations. Despite my propensity for smudging, I do like a fountain pen. The really cheap ones, they scratch, but the flow of more expensive ones is very satisfying. I've never been able to stretch to a Mont Blanc, but I was given a beautiful black Pelican. Writing with that was pure pleasure. Even just drawing up the shopping list was gratifying. The process of writing became part of the point of writing. Must have melted in the fire. I wish I had better handwriting. But Dad's is beautiful. His dad's was better still. Immaculate. He used an italic nib. I think he did a bit of sign writing on the side. Beautiful hand-crafted lettering. Unique for each sign, for each business, each shop. Dying art, I should imagine, now that we've got vinyl lettering. There's been a degradation in handwriting through the generations, as far as up to me. Luke's was no worse than mine, though I did worry whether they were ever going to be able to read his exam papers. They taught him cursive script at primary school. He got his pen license early. Before this, I think they just wrote in pencil, and his words could always be erased. Jimmy Court's dystopia, I imagine pen licenses are only issued to those whose writing proved compliant with the regime, though they seemed too busy setting fire to ice cream vans and careering off half-built motorway flyovers to be worrying too much. Sarah's handwriting was wildly scruffy as she was attempting the cursive script left-handed. But as soon as she was in secondary school and cursive was no longer required, she started printing her letters. Even a typewriter could not have done a neater job. That's one of the wonders of the olden days, how amazingly neat so much of the handwriting was. Even just everyday ledgers and letters, as well as contracts and treaties, all immaculate. Presumably more store was put in handwriting then, more pride taken in it, greater time allocated to it. Important for accuracy. Maybe scribes were more specialised. Writing was the thing they did. Okay, where has the world gone? Phew, there it is. I did actually think I might have nodded off there for a moment. I think I'd like to be a scribe, partly to concentrate on my penmanship, but mostly to be the person who could help others communicate. Someone who couldn't write would come to me, share the message they want to be passed on, and as a scribe I would craft that message, trying to retain the essence of the client's voice whilst heightening their qualities. I suppose a Cyrano de Bergerac, but for the written word. There was a time when, with the rise of the phone, particularly the mobile phone, I thought we may never write a letter again. Then emails and later text messages came along and writing was back, albeit typing, not penmanship. Now apparently lots of young people never use the phone, they just send messages. To be honest, I'm a bit like that. I'm not sure when I last answered our home phone. I just presume always that it's spam. A lot of plant life in the area around here. Oak, home oak, laurel, myrtle, Spanish broom, oleander, hawthorn, sloe, butcher's broom, asparagus. There's also tangerine, orange and lemon, pomegranates, olives, grapevines and figs. I think Computer keyboards should be more touch sensitive. Should respond like a concert piano. Then you could pour your emotion into your typing. The keyboard would respond in kind. Changing point size, font, colour, emboldment and slant, all to communicate the emotion of the sentiments you're typing. This would require a greater proficiency in typing, but we could practice like concert pianists. Type with a flourish. Now voice notes eat into the demand for writing once more, and automatic transcription does the opposite job, converting voice messages to texts. It's a confusing world, but one where perhaps the chance for the expressive TypeScript has never been closer. Constructivism was keen on the expressive typeface. I lost a great book about Alexander Rodchenko in the fire. Typeface, I suppose, is essentially a family of individual fonts. Your choice of fonts is a bit like your choice of clothing. As a culture, I suppose we're default jeans and t-shirts Helvetica. I use Futura, which is virtually the same, but my mate Simon recommended it, and he's always very well turned out, typographically speaking, and sartorially as well, to be fair. Varying too much from the sans serif is dangerous. The serif of which we are generally son are the thin decorative lines at the end of the letter strokes. Possibly some call back to cursive handwriting. They tend to make the font look a bit dated. If I have to go with a serif, I'll always plump for Baskerville. It's clear, bold, designed in Birmingham, so it's partly a loyalty thing. Impact does the job for posters and notices, as the name suggests. Dove's type has a beautiful arts and crafts feel. It was initially only used for the private Dove's press. When the press had to close, its designer threw all the metal punches and matrices used for the printing into the Thames to stop his former business partner from using the font. This act of sabotage, though, didn't win out. Contemporary typesetters have been able to recreate the Dove's font from books printed in it, most notably the stunning Dove's Bible, whose initial I from In the Beginning runs in red halfway down the opening page. And in 2015, 99 years after the first load of punches were poured into the Thames, the Port of London Authority, under guidance of the designer Robert Greene, managed to dredge up 150 pieces of the original type from the river. Then he used these to refine his replica. A version of the Dove's font is used by Thames Tideway to promote their 16-mile-long super sewer under the river, which adds a poetic flourish to the story's end. Water below there looks fairly clear. Doesn't seem to be a sewage problem there. This is Lake Skoda. Skoda, not the same as the car maker. It formed when a group of caves collapsed. The rocks round here must slowly dissolve. They're probably limestone or dolomite. Lake Skoda straddles the border between Montenegro and Albania. Down there is the Buna River, B-U-N-A. It's short, flows between Albania and Montenegro. Begins at Lake Skoda, runs for about 40 kilometres down to the Adriatic Sea. I suppose it's essentially the outlet of a large lake system Water flows out of Lake Skoda, is joined by major tributaries like the Drin River, and then near the mouth the river splits and slows, forming a rare natural delta, creating the island of Ada Boyana, where river and sea meet in constantly shifting channels. Down there in the distance perhaps, but we're not really going that way. The Drin River is the longest river in Albania. There's sort of two rivers formed by the meeting of the White Drin, which rises in the mountains of Kosovo, and the Black Drin, which flows out of Lake Ohrid on the border with North Macedonia. River then continues through northern Albania, passing through valleys and feeding a series of hydroelectric stations. Eventually the Drin system connects towards the Adriatic Sea through the Buna River, making it a vital link between the mountains inland and these coastal plains. I love seeing communication and television masts on hilltops. Sense that all that communication from all over the world is flowing through them. You could just tap into it. You'd know what was happening anywhere in the world. Which I suppose some people can. So we're heading towards Tirana. We'll get there before it gets too dark. All the towns down here are like working hubs, not quite as touristy as further up the coast. Shaped more by traffic and trade and agriculture passing through. Down there is, I don't know how to say this, Lezhe, Lezhe. It's got the tomb of Skanderbeg, 15th century noble and military leader who united all the different Albanian principalities against the Ottoman Empire. He'd originally been taken by the Ottomans as a child, raised and trained by them to be a military commander. Which is probably a mistake on their part, because he returned to his homeland and led a long rebellion against Ottoman expansion. In 1444 he convened the League of Lezhe, a rare moment of political unity among Albanian rulers. I'm looking forward to spending a little bit of time in Albania. I know shamefully little about it. I did know a guy called Claude once. He was a bouncer at a Greek restaurant in London. He was Albanian, nice guy, married one of the customers as it happens. That's how nice he was. Must be challenging being a waiter in a Greek restaurant. I mean, when do you know that a fight's kicked off as opposed to people just smashing up the crockery in celebration of a great meal or special event? Presumably the crockery trade is one you want to get into in Greece. Never a shortage of demand. I think I'd sell them the new plates and offer to take the broken plates away, crush them down and use them for hardcore when building roads or maybe even just back garden patios. Never thought of it before, but those top-to-toe hipster restaurants, they're missing a bit of a trick if they're not serving their food on bone china, made from the bones of the animals that... actually that's probably a bit gross. So I've never been in a Greek restaurant when anyone's actually smashed any plates, except perhaps the waiter who's being too optimistic when cleaning a table. Izzy tells a story of when she was a waitress before she went away to college. She was terrible at carrying more than two things and terrible at adding up more than two things. So she never lasted long in any one job, but she lived in quite a touristy place, so there were loads of different cafes and restaurants all looking for eager new workers. So she pretty much had a full-time career made up of only lasting 1 week in each place. I do know that down there in Albania they all love Norman wisdom. in the same way that Greeks all smash up plates, presumably. His were amongst the few Western films which were shown in the Eastern Bloc during the Soviet era, presumably because the censors believed they didn't portray the capitalist world in any aspirational way. Norman Wisdom put upon low status characters. Was it Pipkin? Something like that. They're put upon by the bosses, but they eventually triumph over them and the upper classes. So presumably by the Albanian censors, this was construed as portraying capitalism in a negative light. After communism collapsed, he visited Albania in the 1990s, was greeted almost like a national hero. One visit, he was mobbed by fans, he met political leaders, even received honorary citizenship of Tirana. Came back in 2001 around an Albania-England football match. The crowd still treated him like a star, despite the presence of modern football celebrities. Norman Wisdom, bigger than David Beckham, at the time before Beckham had quite so many tattoos. I love the Albanian flag. Can't argue with a black double-headed eagle on a red background. It's an old school flag though. If you're a primary school kid, it's really difficult to draw, even if you're good at technical drawing. Primary school kids are often obsessed with flags. Luke was. He learned a lot of his from World Cup sticker books, supplemented every 2 years by Euros sticker books. I think I was obsessed with them as well for a bit. Probably still am. Me and Izzy pinned a world map to our kitchen wall, had flags of the world along the bottom. Helped Luke identify the flags of nations who either didn't play football or weren't very good at it. And then it helped the family keep track of where I was, gave them a sense of the world. That'll be Ash's now, presumably too. So I think I'm going to head directly into Tirana airport. Too tired to mess around with another tiny place. I don't trust myself to land on one of those short, narrow strips. Not as tired as I'm feeling. And then I just want a simple journey into the city centre. Ideally, a nice bit of easy to understand public transport. I can't face hitchhiking, and I'm not up for trudging for miles along country roads in fading daylight like I did in Bologna. Then I just need to find some cheap accommodation with a comfortable bed and some sleep. Then on to Athens to deliver these rings. Thank you for joining us again. And thank you for the compliments on the landing. I almost got 2 of the red lights to turn white, which is apparently the thing you're looking out for. And thank you, I hope Reggie gets a good night's sleep as well. Thank you for joining us. Hope you can join us again next Monday. We'll be back here in Tirana. Reggie will be flying on down towards Athens with those rings that are burning a hole in his little flight bag. Not quite sure what he's going to encounter when he gets there, so do join us to find out. If you missed any of the other episodes, you can catch up with them. This week's one is on Twitch for the rest of the week. Previous episodes are on the Stanscaf YouTube channel. Tell all your friends about it. This is a journey around the world. This is flight number 5 of 80, so there is plenty more to come. Thank you for joining us.